Hi everyone, I am Geraldine Anello, your host for today. So I used to do these conversations with music directors during the pandemic and the confinement because I think the idea for everyone was that it was going to be short term and that we were going to go back to normal. So everybody wanted to invest in themselves and their career and skills. And along with that, I was sharing classes and all that stuff. But now we're facing with the extra $600 a week ending in a couple weeks at the end of July. We're facing Broadway being closed until January. So things have changed dramatically and very fast. And so I decided now these conversations are going to be with professionals in different fields to help us really navigate these really difficult times on many different levels, financials, emotional. Some of it is going to be about music stuff we can do like branding, but it's all going to be conversations. And if you have idea of what you want to hear about, let me know. But our guest today, I'm very excited, is Nashira Lynton. Did I say it right?
Yes, Nashira.
Nashira, welcome. I'm so excited you're here, Nashira. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to chat with you today.
Yes. So for everyone, if you don't know Nashira, she is from her company, Breaking Cycles. She's a financial coach. She has an MBA with a concentration in finance, and she also has a certification in financial therapy. And she offers mentorship and one-on-ones and lots of wonderful services related to finances. So the reason I wanted Nashira here with us today is because we've known each other for about 9 months at this point. And in the many conversations we've had, something that really stuck out when I think of her is her personal story related to money in times of drastic change. And I thought we're heading into this massive drastic change as musicians. We already went through one with confinement, but now we're facing another with a longer term inability to work in our field. And so I really wanted Nashira to be here because she had to deal with making drastic changes in her finances, not only for herself, but also as a mother of two sons. Nashira, would you please tell us a little bit about that time of drastic change in your life?
Yeah, so for me, I when I was going through my own financial journey, I had to make some significant changes in the way I was spending. So it's not that I didn't have access to a budget or I didn't have, financial professionals around me, but for me, it was more of the emotional side of money and the reasons behind why I was spending. And that's what brought me into the financial therapy world, which helped me see that a lot of my spending was spending to either compensate for some area in my life. Or like I like to tell people, not only was I broke, but I was broken. And so when I started to understand the reasons behind my spending or compensating for being a single mom, if I can be honest, when I started to see why I was spending the way I was spending, I had to make some drastic changes, whether that be from shutting off the cable, or cutting back on the way we were eating out or cutting the movies out. And so for some people, quarantine is new, but for me and my kids, I feel like we kind of lived quarantine already, right? Because we had to stop doing a lot of the things that we were accustomed to doing. And so when I got rid of the cable, it took my kids like 3 days before they actually realized it was gone. But one of the things that I did with them was I sat down and I had a conversation. And it wasn't, oh, we're broke or we don't have money or anything like that. But I really started to share with them what my goal was. And so the goal was that we were going to pay off almost $60,000 in debt. And it wasn't a me thing, it was a we thing. And so I had to get them on board. And one of the things I noticed I was spending because the kid wanted something and I just was like, oh, I love the kid. Let me just get the kid a gift. Let me just buy this. Let me just do that. But that really wasn't what I could have been doing, right? And so I found other ways to meet how I show them love without spending the money. And so cutting back on like something we love, like movies, which could run you anywhere between like $70 to $100 for the three of us, because you have to eat out, right? You have to go to the movies and eat out there. We started to do those things at home. We had movie night, right? And I would let them get creative. I would start to let them say, okay, well, we picked this movie and we picked this snack and we picked this, and it would drastically reduce the cost. But we also made other changes. So we weren't spending on every new season for clothing. We were cutting back. What do we really need? I would start to ask those hard questions for me first, and then make it in a way that they could learn to understand it for themselves. Like, how creative could you be? How creative could you be with what you have already? How could you mix that up? Or even with groceries, I started to let them have their own side money for groceries. So, they couldn't fill it up with all junk, of course, but they would get their own little bucket. So $20 for you, $20 for you. You buy what you want so that food can go to waste. So we would waste less food. So those were some of the changes that we made while we were doing that. And it lasted quite a bit of time. It took us almost about 2.5 years before we got out of that really deep part of chucking the money towards the debt.
And so, I mean, did you know it was going to be 2.5 years? Because something that as a musician myself, like, like all musicians, we don't know how long this time is going to last.
Yeah.
Like we're just like, is it back in January? Are we working in January? Are we working next summer? Is this a 2-year thing? Like, are we going to get another job? And how much is that going to pay? Like all these uncertainties are like, how do you budget? How do you deal with, bills and all of that when you don't know?
Yeah, what I would say is, of course, we all wanted to go away quickly, right? Like I wanted the debt to be over really fast. But you have to understand that sometimes if we rush out of this, we also won't be able to understand what we're getting into next. And so what I would say is, it's not about knowing exactly the time where you're going to jump back into the work you love, right? Because maybe right now you may have to be doing something different than what you're passionate about or what you're doing, or your career. But what I would say is, what am I doing with what I have right now? So, for example, you mentioned the unemployment. So am I using the unemployment in a way that's setting me up for what next time looks like? So you may be using your money to pay your everyday expenses, but are you using your money for what I like to call relief spending, right? Are you doing too much of that? Right? So is it, I need to get out the house. And so you're just going anywhere you can go. And when you go outside, the only thing you could really do is maybe go to the supermarket. So you're buying extra food or, so you want to make sure that you're using what you have right now to set you up for later on. So I always start with my non-negotiables. What are the non-negotiable bills that we have to pay? Because if we don't pay, then we'll be homeless. Or if we don't pay, we'll starve. So you want to make sure that your non-negotiables are there. But you also want to make sure that you're leaving room or savings for some other time. And if there's not enough for savings, as long as you're taking care of the non-negotiables, you're at least preparing yourself that when let's say you do open up in January, you go back and you have funding, you have cash. You know what it's like already to live with just your non-negotiables, that you can start to prepare to build back your savings and start to accumulate some sort of wealth so that you're in the future, if something like this happen again, you'll be more prepared.
Mm-hmm. Because there's so many things, like when we're looking at, okay, if we're just looking at non-negotiables and taking everything else away, it seems so overwhelming. It's like, okay, so we're taking out all my entertainment possibilities. I'm going to take out Netflix and Hulu. I'm not going to be able to do delivery anymore. I can't do, like maybe I'm doing a gym app. And like at some point, if you're in confinement and you're not working and you lost your sense of identity with it, what is left? Like, how are you? How are you? Like, where do you find the relief?
Yeah. I would say that it's really sometimes meeting the relief in a different way, right? And so I'm not saying in a toxic way, but it's finding it in a different way. So you mentioned before, like finding your identity in perhaps in what your career was. Well, what would it look like to find your identity in something that's so much more grounded, right? So maybe perhaps you're finding peace and serenity in something else other than your career, something that may not be able to be taken away from you. And maybe you're right, you need some release. So for me, I never got rid of my coffee budget. All those, if you take away $5 a day, I'm a professional coffee drinker and no one's going to take that away from me. But what I did was I allocated just $20. And if you know anything about living in New York City, you know that $20 for coffee doesn't get you that far. But what I started to look at was, why do I normally go get coffee from outside? And that usually involved a walk with a friend, a coworker, session or meeting with a mentor. And I was treating them to coffee. And so I started to find other ways that I can do that. So once the $20 was gone, I started to, hey, are you willing to take a walk? I wouldn't invite them out for coffee, but I'll be inviting them out for a walk. So what other things you can do to meet the same needs with just without spending so much? Maybe you're allocating money for delivery or for your app, or you have the app this month and now it's really nice outside and you go work out and not have the app now and work out outside and then bring the app back later in when you can't go outside. So it's really just about finding the ways that you can have relief but spend to a minimal on it.
I think what's so interesting is something that stood out to me is when you mentioned finding a new way to show your love to your children.
Yeah.
Because I think, you know, for musicians right now, like not being able to play your instrument the way you normally do for such an extended period of time really, really touches your sense of identity. And now I think, hello, are you back?
Yeah.
We froze for a minute. So it really touches your sense of identity. And when you're a parent, and you're used to being a parent a certain way that you rely on, which is showing your children love a certain way, that always will involve money in some capacity, whether it's that you're paying for this place you're living in or you're providing these hobbies or whatever way it is, that musicians right now who are facing not only their loss of identity in their job may also have a sense of loss of their other identity as parents. And I had not thought of that because I'm not a parent. And now you're looking at both of that. Like, how can you keep your sense of identity as a parent when money is a whole other park game? What's the American expression?
Ball game.
Ball game.
Yeah. I think for me, you know, again, like, so we, I don't know if you ever heard of the 5 love languages.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of the assessments that I took back in the beginning, and I would hang it up on the wall because I realized if I buy you a new toy, that doesn't necessarily mean I love you. So what does mean I love you? Maybe it's sitting down, maybe it's hanging out, maybe it's you know, so one of my kids' love language is quality time, and that's also mine. So setting aside time just for that kid. And I mean, in COVID season, like, what else do we have to do besides like meet our kids' love language, right? Like, how do I show up for my kids now? I lost you there for a second, but I hope you got it. But
Yes.
one of the things I realized is, how do I show up for my kids in this way? You know, because they want their mama, right? That's what they really wanted. It's not just the next game. It's they want love. They desired love. And so I started to learn how to meet those love languages in a new way, more affordable way. And that involved a lot of me taking the time to say, okay, well, right now I don't work. And right now I don't go on the computer. Right now I don't do that. And I really started to have these interactions. And so now that's just a natural thing in our house. You know, if they do the opposite of what your love language is, now you're just being mean. So
Wait, so I just want to know, just for the people who are going to watch this, like, how old were your children when you did this? And did you have them take the love language assessment as well?
yes. So this was, I would say, almost seven, or maybe about about 6 or 5 years ago. And so my oldest was maybe about 11, 12, and my youngest, he was only 4. So we had to ask him the questions and then we would answer them for him. But online, you can actually have the kid go in and take the assessment now. And so I've made them redo it actually this COVID season to print out, because sometimes, you know, they're a little bit more aware of what they want. And so we do that often. You know, we write a family statement because we are committed to doing this together. I think that oftentimes as parents, we can feel like the weight of like, oh my God, I have to get this all right because I want to make their lives perfect. But our children are really smart. They are really, really, really good at telling us what they need, just maybe not in the way we want them to. So it's really listening beyond what they're saying so that we can actually do that with them, because they want to be in teams. They want to get creative. They want to help us. And so maybe if you create a chart and you're sharing it with them, like, hey, we didn't go out to eat 7 times today. How much did we save? And have them color it in or show them that what they're doing is impacting the family just as much as it's impacting your budget.
Are there any things that money did buy that they started rebelling when they didn't have anymore?
Well, the cost of video games are super expensive, right? Those are like anywhere between $40 to $60. And so it came a point where they were like, I really want this game. I want this game. I want this game. And I think one of the things I had to say was, okay, you want the game, you buy the game. And that's where it came in like, oh, like I gotta spend my own money on that game. But what that did was enforce the one, not instant gratification, right? But it also enforced them learning how to save. Like, you want this? Now go get it. And they, sometimes they did. They did a great job at it, and sometimes they didn't. And sometimes I would go and I would match what they saved. So you save 20, I'll give you another 20 just for the effort. But it really came down to that. And we had money arguments, just like sure spouses and couples do, but learning how to come back and not leave the table until we have come to agree to disagree. And I'm the boss, so but still, learning to have those conversations now is really important for them. So when they grow older, they can have those conversations with their spouse and with their kids.
Yeah, because right now so many musicians are looking for jobs. It's like, okay, we don't know how long this is going to be, let's look for jobs. But yeah, I guess if you're a parent and you're a musician, maybe at the same time you're looking for a job, your children can find ways that they can also do something to help themselves too. Maybe get some little extra dollars here or there in a way or another. Little
Yeah.
children entrepreneur. We know how this goes these days. They're going to end up multi-billionaire at 12.
Start a YouTube channel and then they'll out earn their family.
Yeah, and when I'm saying 12, I mean, I'm probably already like, they're too old by 12. It'll be like 5.
They're really smart.
Yeah. Did you encourage your children to find ways to make their own money? Or did you have like, wait until you're like 14 or 16?
Yeah, so my son didn't get his first job until his summer youth program until he was 14. But we do commission-based work in the house, so they can earn money from me. And I set that aside in my budget, estimating what I think they would earn. So they have jobs around the house. There's some things I won't pay them for, but there are jobs around the house, and they will get paid for those jobs. But they also my oldest is into investing. So he would be able to, let's say he earns money, it could go straight into his IRA. And so that was interesting for him to start experiencing that 2 years ago.
This is bringing up memories in me that I forgot. But actually, my first job ever, because I was raised by a single mother, and when I turned 15, she was like, you gotta work. Like, you can't. And because I took piano lessons, and by 15, as a pianist, you're pretty good. She was like, you should teach piano lessons. You'll make more money than, if you just wait until you can work in the summertime. And it provided a great lesson, which was much beyond the money, because at the time I felt, I'm 15. What business do I have teaching piano? Like, what do you mean? I don't know enough. I'm a student myself. And she was like, you know enough to teach a beginner. And she found my first student, who was this older gentleman who sold us waffles for like years at the waffle store. And he came in and I was like, he's a grown man. Like, I'm not even teaching a little kid. Like, I'm 15. And he was just very, happy that I was teaching him. And I got a couple more students, and I was making a really good amount as a piano teacher, probably 15 euros an hour. And it was like, what? And the biggest lesson was, I would have never dared try it because I didn't think I had the skills. And I did. Once I started, I was like, I'm giving way too much to my students. They're freaking out because I'm teaching them what I know. I'm not teaching them what they need on the first piano lesson. I'm telling them about dynamics and about all these crazy things, and all they need is like, do, re, mi, like, that's it. And that was such a bigger lesson than money. It was also like, get started and then how you're doing, instead of just thinking about it and figuring it out later.
Yeah.
So
I think it sets you up really well, right? And so you have this entrepreneur spirit, since I know you for the past few months, I can see it in you, right? Like, you take action to do these entrepreneur jobs. It's like, I'm not going to drown. I'm going to get up and I'm going to do something. And that's exactly what I also try to teach my kids. Maybe right now you can't get up, and so my son can't do summer youth, but what else can you do? Right? They do have other things you can do, or maybe you can pick up someone's kid and babysit because you're, a little bit older now. So there are things that I'm teaching them now, because it's not like they have to, right? Whereas adults, we have the pressure that we have to earn. The kid doesn't have that same pressure. So it's good to give them that independence to pick something they like or point it out like your mom did, but also to remind them, like, even if they don't, if that doesn't work out, you still got me, right? They still got a backup plan. We're not going to kick them out. And I think that that's a good way to help them jump into that.
And I think that is a real fear in musicians right now. It's like, what are we gonna do with bills? I mean, beyond like, it's like concretely, particularly I assume for the single parents out there, it's like, well, what do you do with bills? Like, you've got a couple of people to take care of, and particularly if you live in some of the more expensive cities like LA and San Francisco and Montreal and New York, like maybe Nashville is coming up, I think now also. Like, what, as far as like cost, I mean, not as a city, obviously Nashville is amazing, but as far as cost is concerned for rents, and what do you do for that? Because now it's like two big drastic changes. You had the one of telling your children about confinement, which is a whole change of life, and now a few months later it's like, oh, maybe we're moving, maybe we're going to live with family, maybe we're like, how do you deal with all of that?
Yeah. I think it's so for me, having those conversations for the first time were really hard. And I think I failed at them, if I could be honest. But it's really continuously having conversations. So in our house, we have weekly family meetings. They're not long, they're really short, but we talk about things that are difficult, but I let them express what they're feeling. So I know for some people that is a reality. They are going to be moving. They are going, but you want to give your kids the opportunity to just not hear what you're telling them, but to ask questions. And so having those conversations, not just for the first time, like, okay, we're moving today, you want to make sure that you're having continuous conversations with them, even if it's, when I first started, it was on the living room floor. Now we're a little bit more professional. We moved to the kitchen table. But before it was just on the floor because they're kids, but we sat on the floor. We had these little talks, not just about money, but just about anything that may be difficult. So I would say start with having these small conversations with your kids before you unload something so big, and allow them to express what they're feeling or what they're saying without any judgment.
What are some of the, if would you be able to share some of the questions maybe your children had during this time?
Yeah, so with my kids, some of them are funny, right? Like, so they would try to confirm what place is closed, like all their favorites, like, was GameStop closed? Let's prove it. Let's go walk over there. Like, so some of those are silly. But some of the questions are, my kids didn't like remote learning. So are they opening up school? And that's interesting, right? Because most kids are like, no school, but are they opening up school? What are they going to do? Other questions are, my youngest asks this question all the time, but he's like, are we broke? Like on the scale, like broke or rich, and
Yeah, but I think that would be such a triggering question right now to a musician when you yourself are battling that exact question within yourself.
yeah. So those are some of the questions that they would ask me. And that's when I say, oh, you want to have that conversation and we'll talk about it. Because I already know that I know my situation, but obviously for someone else who may not haven't been doing all this finance work, they may not know their situation. I would say first, handle it with yourself. Before you have that conversation, you can set up a money meeting with your kid and be like, hey, how about we have our first family meeting and we set it up at this time? And I would say then go back and deal with it first for yourself, have that understanding first, and then think about the kid's age and what's appropriate to lay on that kids, because you don't want to burden them, right? We're not designed to like have our kids carry our weight, but really to understand that for ourselves. But we also too have to be able to ask the hard questions, right? And get that help where we may need it from. So don't be afraid, just like your kid, to ask hard questions, but for you to ask hard questions and find the right people that can help you answer that.
So what kind of right questions are we looking at here?
So I would say first off, if you're in a situation where, you may need to move or you may be evicted, or light or gas, I would first make sure that your state, what are their rules about being evicted at this time? What are their rules about lights being cut off? Because a lot of people don't understand. Like, I was on a call with a client last week who is trying to move, and the agency that they were working with was charging them tremendous amount of money. And they're like, well, they're scared. They don't know. But that's actually illegal in New York now. And so by helping them see that there's a certain amount that they cannot ask you, and that was a simple 30-minute conversation, but that person was willing to ask me like, hey, this is what's going on with me moving. So making sure that your state, what rules your state has in place due to COVID season about moving, about your light being cut off, about gas. Also being willing, if there is, a lack of income coming in, or you're not meeting your expenses, what kind of state benefits? I know a lot of people don't like to hear that, especially if you've been earning an income for a long time, but being willing to say, okay, what benefits can I benefit that my state may have right now, since it may be short term? Because the idea is you do want to go back to work. You do want to be able to provide for your family in a different way. So asking those hard questions to the right people, right? So like financial professionals that may be offering that type of help right now. There are other resources that states are providing or companies are providing. So I would start there.
What are some state benefits in New York? Like a lot of our watchers are going to be in New York.
Yeah. So for example, so New York State, obviously in September, they passed that new rule about moving costs, right? So I think there's a cap of about 125 max of what a realtor can charge you. They can't do the big, 1 month's rent, 1 month security, or 2 months back rent. That's not existent anymore. There's a new law. There's also, they still have that law where you cannot be evicted if you due to loss of income for COVID, right? So if your income was impacted specifically because of COVID, and you were up to date on your rent, but now you're not, your landlord cannot take you to court and evict you. It's not happening. Also, the same thing with your light and your gas bill. If you're getting insurance because, let's say, you're in a Medicaid program, or they cannot cut off your Medicaid program or any type of health insurance until after October. So those are some of the things that you can check with.
Wait. But see, that's the questions for musicians. What happens in October? We're not going to be back at work in October. What do we do then?
That I'm not sure of, because obviously things are changing, right? So they may extend that. They may say, okay, well, if you have this, because then there's still the fact that you have millions of people still who may be out of work, then they may be eligible for other programs that the state may have at that point, right? So it's always being able to say, well, what are they doing before I go try to do something on my own completely? Like if you exhausted all your other options,
I've definitely not seen anything on forums talking about that. Now that you're saying that, it makes a lot of sense. So what about food? Are there I know we all see like the WIC program at the grocery store. Like, how do you know what it takes? Like, how does that work?
I don't know about the WIC program, so I won't pretend here. But I do know that they have, SNAP benefits in New York, right? So SNAP benefits, normally you can get SNAP benefits. You go in, or you do it online, so that the New York State health insurance, you will go in and you will put in your information, and they can tell you what you qualify for, whether that be insurance or SNAP. And then based off what you qualify for, you get based off your family size and what you may be getting as income. Right now, they're also giving parents for kids who are in New York City, they also giving them money that they didn't use in school lunch. So if your kid was in a school that was provided free lunch, they are giving parents back that money. So they would be seeing.
Is that going to be automatic, or do parents have to answer a sheet, a form or something in order to get that back?
No, that's actually going to be automatic. So if you weren't receiving any benefits like myself, they should be sending you a card in August where you would have money for each kid that you can use, right? And so for some parents, they may still buy from Amazon. Amazon accepts CBT. So there are some places where you can still use it online. There, you'll be able to go to the grocery store and use that money allocated towards food.
Oh, so it doesn't come as like a cash amount. It comes as something that you can spend in specific places.
It comes in as an EBT card, which is really widely accepted in New York. And again, you could even use it on Amazon Fresh for food. So
Great. What other awesome tips do you have besides looking at state help?
I would honestly say I start with the state depending on the person's situation, but then again, there's always the option of working with a professional, right? So if you feel like you've exhausted options, but there are professionals who are doing this for volunteer basis, I would say also start there. In New York, they have 311 where they provide financial counseling. And it is very basic, but it does help you. And they do let you know also what type of state benefits you can qualify for.
And that's just 311, the same 311 we call about fireworks?
Same 311 we call about our neighbors.
Wow. And so you just say, like, I need financial help, and here they are giving you
Yeah,
financial help.
they would set you up with a location, and most of them are credit unions. They would set you up with a financial counselor from a location, and they would help you. And they really help you with the basics, but they also tell you if there are state benefits that you may qualify for, which is pretty awesome.
What were some of the most surprising moments you had once you started going through your drastic change?
I didn't miss spending as much as I thought I would miss. So I was a big spender in terms of not big items. I didn't buy big items. I bought a lot of little items. So a lot of trips to Target and a lot of trips to dollar store, like little items. I wasn't like, oh, I'm buying me a $5,000 bag. I didn't miss it as much because I started to notice that I was accumulating stuff, right? And there was nowhere else to put the stuff. And so that was really surprising for me. Also, how little I needed to live on was a huge surprise. Like, I'm not a really high maintenance kind of girl. So it wasn't like, oh my God, I didn't need all that. Because I was always complaining, like, I need to earn more money. I need to earn more money. And really, I just needed to stop spending so much money. That was also a big thing. And I also learned a lot about interest. And so when I started earning interest in certain savings account, that blew my mind. I was like, you pay me just to have my money there? That was like a big mind blowing thing for me. I know for some people, they probably know that already. But at that time, I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, so if everything is in your checking, just opening a savings account will really help. Get some free money in, even if it's $2, it's $2 you wouldn't have otherwise. There's your coffee right there.
Exactly.
Black, no sugar, small in New York City, $2.
Exactly. That's exactly how I take it if you ever have coffee.
I know. Well, we're New Yorkers. What was some of the hardest things from those drastic changes?
I would say the hardest thing, I did lose a lot of friends. So I was saying no to a lot of events. So I would say, I had a little script and I would say, oh no, I can't do this right now, but if you want, you can come hang out with me at home. And I think all the no's kind of, you started to see who was there and who was willing to go through that journey with you and who wasn't. And, I grew apart from a few friends, and that was hard at the time. Because you still wanted socialization, you still want, mingling and belonging. But I started to find it in other areas, and I started to get really close to the people who were willing to stick this through with me.
Wow, that's really powerful. I mean, in this time of confinement, maybe that's going to look a little bit different. But who knows? Maybe actually everybody will be excited to hang out at the park rather than have to go out. That's, I guess, talking about going out, that's the other part, is that a lot of people want to help right now. So they're in a difficult situation and they still want to give to charities, and they want to help the small business down the road, try to survive and not close their doors in a couple months. How do you manage those different values you have, that you want to do the right thing financially and you also want to be there for your community?
Yeah, I would say, again, it goes back to how else can I show up for you? So, for me, I serve in a community at church, and I can't go in, right? There's no church. There's no doors open to me. So what else can I do for the community? How else? And so we have a pantry. Can I go pack bags today, me and my kids? That's serving. Can I support the small business by, okay, maybe this is the one day out the week that we are going out and I'm going to do it here. And not only am I going to do it, I'm actually going to promote it. I'm going to go on social media. I'm going to share it. I'm going to like it. I'm going to talk to another friend about it. Like, hey, if you guys decide that this is your week to go out, shop here. So again, it's more about finding ways to do the same thing, just as you can spend as least, because you value supporting people and giving, and I'm all for that, but you also got to value that if you don't take care of your main priorities, your non-negotiable right now, you won't be around long enough to actually support it in the long run when they probably also might need it the most.
Yeah, there's just so many parts of it. You think you're having a conversation about money, and you're having a conversation about love, and you're having a conversation about community, and money just is really like touches so many parts of our lives, and like jobs and identity.
Yeah.
It's all over. Well, thank you so much, Nashira, for taking this time to be
So
with
much
us.
for having me. I wish you guys all the best, and I hope everything works out, especially back in January or in January.
And everybody, if you want to check out more about Nashira, she's Nashira Lynton, and you can find her at breaking dash
Breaking
cycles.com. I never know that word for the dash, but breaking-cycles.com. She's a wonderful financial coach with lots of different ways she works with people. Thank you again so much,
Thank you so much
Nashira.
for having me.
Bye.
Bye.